This is a report from one of our partners' internal data. So they're a $2 million a year training company. And after looking at it, implementing strategies, we added over 150,000 in yearly profit to their company. And in this video, I'll simply walk you through every single element of the report, what we found, what we fixed, the strategy to implement, not only that added them 150,000 in yearly profits, but also the plan that they're going to follow to add the next million in revenue. So this report is based on 763 B2B clients over the last 10 years. So it is full of data. And from this, we got 3 strategies that will help our partner add another million in revenue. So the first thing that we immediately saw when we've done all of the report and looked at the numbers is that the top 1% of their clients, B2B clients, were bringing them around 17.5% of their entire revenue and profits. Think about that for just a second. 1% of their clients on 763 got them 17.5%. And when we looked further, we looked at the top 10% of their clients was actually bringing them almost half of their revenue, meaning top 1%, 17.5, top 10%, almost 50%. And this lesson, this specific element that we communicated with our partner and that we executed on is that not all of your customers are equal. Meaning that if you have a very large target, or even if you're not targeting a specific avatar in your ads on your website, it is a big mistake, especially on the B2B side. Because one B2B customer can literally be worth, like in this situation, 100 times more in profits than another. So when we looked at the data, we saw that if they were just looking at those customers, the top 1%, and if they just got one new customers exactly like their top 1% every single month, they could add a million in revenue in the next 12 months. And here's the thing, you're probably familiar if you're in training or in education, these B2B customers have very high margins. It's just the law of compounding. I'm not sure if it's the right rule, but basically if your instructor, your trainer is already there, if you've already built a relationship, all of these things stack and it makes that you have higher profit margins. So on top of that, not only did they bring way more revenue ultimately, they also had higher profit margins for these specific customers. From that analysis, we identified 2 target segments. And for them, they should only implement and execute their advertisement on the B2B side to these companies. It is irrelevant to add 100 or 200 extra B2B clients if they're bringing you, 100 times less than your top customers. And of course, we had a big strategy, execution on how do we target them, how do we sell to them, what is the proper offer we can make them to acquire them as customers. All of that was in more details. I'll explain it in another video, but that's the first step that we implemented. Then if we zoom one step further into these top 1% and top 10% customers, they also bring 5 times the amount of revenue. So their top customer is bringing 5 times as much as their second and third customer. Think about that for a second. So not only their top 1%, but their top client of all time is bringing 5 times more than their second best client. And what does that tell us? That tells us that they should really focus on getting 10 more of that top customer. And again, a lot of companies, they don't think about it this way, especially in training and education. They pretty much wait for client to come to them and, to discover their website, to, wait many years until they contact their company. Well, I think we both know it's the wrong way to approach this, right? If you know you can bring a ton of value to a potential customer, you should be willing and able to contact them, to get in front of them, explain your offer, and educate them on how you could work with them. And that's part of the strategy that we implemented with them. So how exactly we can approach these perfect customers and convert them into sales. So we identified that their top customers on average was giving them 90,000 in ultimate lifetime value. So that's over a few years. That's what they made with extremely high profit margins. So 90,000 in revenue per new customer over a few years. So that simply means that every month, if they got one of these clients, they would get almost 1.1 million in revenue at the end of the year just by focusing on that target avatar. And when you look at it that way, it's a much simpler plan to follow. Just 12 customers this year. That's all we do. We just focus on that, and that's what we have helped them implement and do. And one last thing before getting to the next point, these top customers, when you look at it from the lens of 12 of these customers is going to create my business 1.1 million in revenue, you should not be fearful on investing 100,000, 150, even 200,000 to acquire these customers. And that's where knowing how much does it cost to acquire a customer gets into play, and how much does a customer will bring you over a few years. If you don't know these two numbers, you cannot scale your advertisement. You cannot scale predictably your company. And that's what we looked at with them. So they didn't know how to spend on marketing. They didn't even know if their marketing was working. They tried spending on Google Ads and some other, on Meta, and they just didn't know how their advertisement was being spent. They weren't tracking any specific metric. And we've dialed everything, every metric down for them with a clear path to attain it. So that was the first lesson, meaning that not every client is equal, and you need to know your absolute dream client in order to scale your advertisement predictably and with a high return on investment. The second data point is the percentage of retention, meaning the number of their clients, B2B clients, that were getting recertified in their scenario every 1 to 2 years. So in healthcare training, safety training, mandatory training, companies have to get recertified their staff. And so it's a really important metric to track, because in education and training, you either sell another training to more of their employees, or an additional training, or a certification. There's not a lot of ways to increase the amount that you can generate from a customer apart from their size. So if they're a much bigger company, you can gather more revenue from them on a pure logic point. So from the thousands of training and education companies that I've looked at personally, I've talked with owners, I've looked at data, I've worked with them. From the thousands that I've looked at, 40% retention rate for the B2B size for that specific training company is very low. And when I asked the owner, and as we talked, I pretty much understood, and it was very clear that nothing was getting done in order to increase that number. And that's another little problem in the industry. I'd say a big problem is that we look at a metric, a number, and we just think that it's normal. We'll just leave it that way. That's your normal metric. But I've seen many, many companies in a similar space and in the exact same space that are at 70, 80% retention, meaning that once they get a customer, they will stick with them. They will rebuy their certification or training a year or two after that. 80%. And now they're at 30%. And if they just did that, so if they just focused on getting from 40% to 80% with some of the tactics that I'll get into in a second, they would double their EBITDA and they will double the revenue within the next 12 to 18 months. So when you look at numbers like that, you have to know, first of all, can we improve it? Can we double it? Can we make a massive increase on the improvement of that metric? And then how can we implement that? So we know that we can improve it. Now, how can we actually increase that number? So the first one is simply, do you have a real reliable follow-up system? Not we send a blast email, a year and a half after, just before the certification is coming up, not manually sending one message to the entire customer list. None of that. Having a predictable way to stay in contact with the person, offer them value, stay in communication, and have a plan, a path to get them to the next certification. So that's the first one. The second one is part of the sales process. As you get their team certified, trained, you should already be talking with them, scheduling the next time, the exact date and moment for them to do the certification. It should already be done, right? You're already booked in, it's already processed. Let's not even think about it further. not wait until it's been 1 to 2 years and then try to recontact them. That's a terrible approach. And another really simple tactic is to continuously sell to your best customers. And that sounds counterintuitive, but as you stay in conversation, you are providing a lot of value to them. Just the audits that you'll do for their company, just giving them a report of what has happened, giving them update on laws in the industries, on all of these things. When you keep a client and you actively are communicating with them, you don't even realize the amount of value that you're giving them, because for them it's something completely foreign. So if we take healthcare, safety, even IT, cybersecurity training, you as the expert, you know so much that you don't even realize that simple sentences and constant communication with your client gives them a lot of trust for you and your company and value. And ultimately, that's what's going to lead them to continue working with you. You literally just need to have a basic sales motion in place, and for it to be extremely spot on and great, not we do it sometimes and we hope that they re-sign with us, which is the strategy that our partner unfortunately had that we fixed. The last data point is the size of the classes cohorts of our partner. So it's very important, in training and education, that you have either on the B2C side or the B2B side, you need to know how many people are you training, and that has an incredible impact on profit margins. So we looked at the data, and on average, they were sitting at 6 to 8 students, people per class cohorts being trained. And that again sounds normal, and that might be industry average. But if we looked at some of their classes where they had double the amount of students, so for example, 15 instead of 6 to 8, that increased their profit margins by almost 50%, because all of the costs stayed the same, normal, and 15 per class was very reasonable. They were not over one of each other. They had plenty of space, and that was ideal to be at 15. But because they had many classes and cohorts, and they just let really people take the time they wanted, it was natural that some classes had way lower amount of people, so lower than 5 sometimes. And on these classes, they actually lost money, and that happens all across the industry. You're gonna lose money on a class or break even barely just because you want to keep the reputation of your company. And I completely understand that. It's understandable, but you have to realize how stupid it is. You cannot keep growing as a company and keep helping more and more people if you're stuck breaking even and being stressed, not being able to reinvest in your company. So one of the things that we looked at is, how can we make it so that we don't lose goodwill, trust, and just the quality of the service with our customers and also getting it to 15 student per classes, so people per classes, cohorts if you want. And one of the ways that we utilize this, I won't dive into all of the details, but it was literally looking at all of the previous data from the last few years of which week was the most busy, which season is the most busy. Can we remove a few cohorts and classes in advance so there's less, but we can condense it and schedule people for those specific dates so the profit margins is way higher. You have to be careful about your profit margin and to not break even on classes that you've spent so much money and time on. For the end of the analysis, I'll share exactly what were the strategies that we implement to help them and a quick resume. So the first thing, as we identified 2 exact, very specific target clients that they needed to go after, we have 2 profiles right here. So we have one and the other, with not only this precise description, where and how to build the list to contact these people and to market to them, but also marketing angles. We have ad angles, and we also have ways to change the offer adapted to every single target audience. Then we implemented a B2B upsell playbook, meaning that they were working with clients and only selling to them maybe once after, or they were only getting recertified once, over the next few years. And we've built a total strategy that we've actually implemented in their company to increase the number of times and number of training and certification they were selling to their customers, and of course for them to be sticking with their company longer. There were other things that I wanted to talk about, but I stuck with the three things that will ultimately help them add another million in revenue without a single doubt in the next 12 to 18 months. And it's a very clear path. Before working with us, they were pretty much all over the place, trying a bunch of different strategies, or not, pretty much being froze by not knowing what to do. So if you're a training education company owner and you'd like to get such a report from myself, looking at where your company is at, what are levers that you can pull to grow the company, and even ways to increase the overall value of your company, because we're in the process of buying and purchasing an education training company. So if that's you, you'd like a report like that, simply add your information below. There's a form, and we'll simply add a few questions, and we'll be able to get back to you with a proper report. So hope this video was helpful, and have a great day.